I am your host Adrian, and today I will be talking about the Final Fantasy VII Remake games, The Three Body Problem by Liu Cixin, and more. Afterwards, be sure to subscribe to be notified when future episodes are released, and show your support by liking and leaving a comment. Thank you for joining. 2024 is shaping up to be a good year for video games, minus the layoffs that already hit the industry pretty hard. Supermassive Games, the developer behind PS4 hit Until Dawn, just announced they are laying off 90 or so employees. I liked Until Dawn and some of its successors for a bit, and this seems like a dark time for video game companies everywhere. I hope any devs or game creators struggling with this find a way to get through this. February is almost over, and something I am highly anticipating is Final Fantasy VII Reunion. I've been dying for this sequel ever since I first finished the remake 2 years ago. Now with the demo for Rebirth out, I've been spending my time replaying FF7 Remake and the new Crisis Core Reunion. Now, I wanted to start with talking about Reunion since I had just completed it as of recording now, and the experience is still fresh in my mind. I never thought this game would get a port, let alone a remake. I played the original on the PSP, and it is entirely noticeable that the remake should be how this game is experienced. Not only is the combat and visuals improved to what you would expect in a remake, the game has an added quality of life changes that greatly enhance the experience of the original Crisis Core. It even made it enjoyable for a returning fan like me. Experience Crisis Core story again was thrilling this time compared to my first time, and I think that comes from my anticipation with Rebirth. This game doesn't add anything new in terms of content, but it certainly would be important to the overall story of FF Rebirth. I was actually enjoying the combat way more this time than I think I ever have. The DMW system seems to be more in your favor, giving you summons and breaks more frequently. Upgrading and mixing up my materials was also a nice mechanic that kept the game fresh. I hope that's something that may return in future FF7 games or Final Fantasy games. It's intriguing to see how this game plays on hard mode. I know spin-offs are not everyone's cup of tea, but whether or not you're waiting to see how Rebirth handles Crisis Core content, or you've never played Crisis Core before, it's a unique but enjoyable Final Fantasy VII side story. Yeah, I liked it. It was nice to see that Square Enix gave some love to um, a smaller side project for Final Fantasy. Crisis Core is not integral to the overall story. You don't need to play it, but it does add a little bit of context. You don't get the full story with the main remake game, and let alone the original FF7 game is a little muddy with its flashbacks. It doesn't tell you everything outright. So Crisis Core kind of fills in those gaps and allows you to play and experience FF7 in a new and unique way. Zack is a pretty cool character. He's a little more charismatic and like boisterous than Cloud is at the beginning. So you get that nice duality. But there's a lot of similarities between the games that I think fans returning from original or remake would like to play Crisis Core and vice versa. So yeah, it was actually really enjoyable playing that, and I was surprised they remade that. I was surprised they made a port of it. I thought, Crisis Core and some of the other side stories for Final Fantasy VII would just be left to the wayside when they were doing these remakes. But no, it seems like they're doing a big celebration of the fact that like these things were made, even if they weren't seen as like the best part of the franchise or the experience. They're still being celebrated and included, which is great. You know. I definitely want to talk about my second playthrough for Final Fantasy VII Remake. I've played it Final Fantasy VII Original a handful of times. However, this is my second time going through specifically the remake, and I finally got a chance to play the DLC that features Yuffie. Um, but sadly, my PS4 did not save my old remake save file, so I had to play this on normal rather than hard. That was a little bit of a bummer, but FF7 Remake was incredible this second time around. It looked so clean and vibrant on the PS5, way better than when I played it on the PS4 years ago. And getting to relive the chapters like the marketplace dance and the Sephiroth fights were really great. I think the gameplay really shines in those moments of like those big boss battles when you like I remember fighting Sephiroth in the turn-based mode from the original FF7 game, and that was just enjoyable with the ATB gauge. But this is different, a little more engaging, and it was definitely a lot crisper on the PS5 That was really fun. The DLC added quite a lot to the game, like new gameplay mechanics and some new characters to play as for its DLC segment. But it's a little short. I was honestly expecting it to be more of like a 10 or 15 hour experience, but it's more like 3 or 5. You could blast through that pretty quickly. And I just thought it would have a little more to do with the story or involve Yuffie a little more into the plot or like bridge into Rebirth when I first played it. But it's kind of like its own thing. It's isolated to specifically just Remake. Like it ends right when Plate 7 drops, I believe. So yeah, that was a little disappointing to see how short it was. But as the introduction for Yuffie, I think it's pretty cool. You see Yuffie teased a little bit within Crisis Core and Remake itself, but it's good to have a DLC like focused to her. I just wish it was a little longer. Um, yeah, like I said, there wasn't much to say about this game specifically because Remake is such a phenomenal remake. It truly is. Even if it's just like 1/3 of the original product, you still get like a full game out of that, and it just bridges into Rebirth, which is going to be fantastic. So if you haven't played Remake or Crisis Core, you absolutely positively should before checking out Rebirth. That's my opinion. Um, I do plan on having an episode dedicated to Rebirth sometime next month. When I finish it, um, I took off this Friday just to play Rebirth, so I'm excited to get that get going. They also put in Advent Children in the theaters, which is pretty interesting. I don't think anyone should pay like modern ticket prices. They're probably like 20, 25 bucks for a ticket. Um, because this movie came out 2007 or so. It's an older movie, but it's still good. Out of the two or I guess three Final Fantasy like animated movies that they have, it's the best one. They have this one. They have the one with the ghost people, the one that was really bad, and then they have the 15 movie, the one that involves Final Fantasy 15. That one was a little okay. I wasn't much of a big fan of the story for that game, so I wasn't like invested into it. But yeah, they have Advent Children, which might tie into Rebirth or somehow by the end of it. And that's just we're just waiting for that game to come out. That's just me. You know, um, I've been playing Dragon's Dogma as well. Dragon's Dogma Dark Arisen, in preparation for Dragon's Dogma 2 that comes out in end of March. This is my first playthrough of this game ever, and I've seen tons of it be talked about online. Some of it in good and bad light, but it seems like nowadays, more recently, people have been talking about it in a much more positive light, especially with the sequel being announced. I think it had a rocky start at launch, like a pretty rough growing of its fan base, and I think at the time maybe mechanics or the gameplay wasn't as solid, but it seems to have a really good following now. And playing it, I'm enjoying it. I wish you could target enemies a little more properly, but overall, it's pretty cool to level up your character and just go out into a world. A little hard finding quests and like tracking them, going through the menu. I'm playing it on the Switch right now, but so far I'm not having any issues. There's no big technical hiccups or anything like that. I'm still pretty early in the game. Um, I just beat the Hydra boss and just got to the capital, and I'm doing some of the side quests around there. I'm about level 10 or 11, I think. I've been doing a lot of killing, a lot of enemy fighting, so I'm relatively high level. And I'm playing a mage, which is pretty cool. You get some pretty cool spells. I don't know what vocation I'm gonna go with. Maybe like mage, archer, sorcerer. Uncertain what I'm gonna pick as my final vocation. But this just kind of helps fill in the time until Dragon's Dogma 2 comes out. That's what I'm gonna be doing, waiting for that sequel. For 2, I'm dying to play the Trickster vocation. When I saw that during the gameplay trails, I was like, that looks nutty. That looks really nutty. How the fog can like trick the enemies, and you can make like illusions over big open like cliffs or overhangs and stuff like that. And I'm more excited to see what kind of spells they have later on, because I imagine it can't just be those. You kind of have a little more to your arsenal, and mixing match with that with like ranger characters or mage characters and all that kind of stuff is gonna be really fun. So I'm entirely excited for playing Dragon's Dogma 2. If you're playing any of the Final Fantasy games or Dragon's Dogma games right now, leave a comment below and let me know what you think of them while you play them. You know. Now that's typically about it for video games. The beginning of the year is pretty barren for a lot of games. I'm not getting every game that comes out, but FF7 and Dragon's Dogma 2 is what's on my main list for right now. And besides, video games, I've been just doing a lot of other stuff like reading books and watching shows. It's just been, pretty lazy on that front. But the TV shows I've been watching are tied into the book I was reading. Um, that book is the fourth installment into Cixin Liu's Remembrance of Earth's Past series, otherwise known as Three Body. Now, I first read the Three Body trilogy in 2002, and I could not put it down. The characters were intriguing, mysterious, and also so incredibly human the entire time. And from page one of the story, it takes you on twists and turns that don't stop, even into the new fourth installment that I'm reading. Now, I would be doing this entire series a disservice by trying to describe it to you because I truly think it's better experienced with as little knowledge as possible. And I like to get as many science fiction fans into this series as possible. The premise of this series is that scientists all around the world are committing unalive and leaving their last words as physics is dead. The story picks up from there and follows a wide cast that includes a detective, a nanomaterial scientist, and a journalist, all investigating these strange suicides. This book is true science fiction, putting humanity into a crucible that changes their understanding and place in the universe forever. Like I said, I wouldn't speak too much on the series because I think you should read it for yourself. Now, at the time of this recording, I have not finished the fourth novel yet, and I did watch one of the live action adaptations that came out earlier last year. I would also like to state that Netflix is doing its own adaptation coming out later this year, I believe. Um, for the first adaptation show, that was actually really good. And the entire time I was watching it, I was wondering how far they were going to go in the series, whether or not they were going to end right after book one, or if they were going to delve into a little bit of book two by the end. And that was what really got me going because I already read the book, so I knew the story. But to have that visual representation always adds like a next layer to it. It adds a better way of understanding, maybe character expressions or things like action scenes, things like that. So, adaptations have a good place in the world. It just depends on how they're done. And I think the Three Body adaptation, the first one, done by I think Tencent, is really good. And I am more excited for Netflix's adaptation because they have a much larger budget and they could do a little more, especially with some of the later things down the line. So yeah, I think that the first adaptation that they had was actually really good. You can watch it on Amazon Prime. That's how I watched it, and it only has subtitles for English and original Chinese audio, which I don't think is a big problem for most people. Now, sadly, this show only has 30 episodes, which seems pretty long for most people, but I think 30 is you know a pretty good amount. I think it's okay. Might be pretty long for some people. But it ends right after book one or so with about the same kind of cliffhangers that you get from book one. So the same kind of questions are answered, and that leaves more room open for the sequels to come out, which I think is pretty cool. Now, if you get past the 30 episodes and you still want to know what happens after, I recommend reading the second book, The Dark Forest. Um, the characters in the show represented fairly well, and I thought the acting was relatively good. There's even some pretty good CGI moments that were surprising. I wasn't expecting CGI to be a part of the show, but there's moments in the show that obviously were done because CGI might have been cheaper and better to represent. Obviously live action would have been a lot harder. So I like the inclusion of CGI. I think that was really good. I wonder if Netflix is going to go that route because some of the more science fiction-y aspects of Three Body kind of might get in the way of that kind of representation. Do you understand what I mean? Yeah, I would have liked to done a episode focusing on the entire series, but I wasn't really gonna reread the entire series again. The trilogy is pretty long, and I mostly just wanted to read the fourth book because I read them so recently that they're pretty fresh in my mind. And the TV show was a nice change of pace, you know. So if you have, you know, time to spare for 30 episodes, you know, go give that a watch. It's a really good mystery. You know, it is science fiction at its heart, so it's going to take um, some very scientific like notions and turns or whatever with its story. You know, it's not like a actual murder mystery or it's not anything like that. It's hard science fiction. You know, it changes the way that we might look at physics or reality or ourselves as humans. You know, it'll change that about us, and that's what I always like about science fiction is that it reflects us. It makes us look inside and see how doing that changes us, or if we don't do it, we could change, or anything like that. I think anything is possible in science fiction, and it's just how it's handled that makes it realistic. You know, like something like breaking physics, breaking like the fundamental science that we understand. You know, as fictitious and imaginary as it sounds, it's intriguing and it's cool. That's one of the cool things I like about science fiction. So yeah, go read Three Body Problem. Go do that. Go read all three books. Go watch the shows. Tell Netflix to make the show faster because I want to watch it. You know, I think the Three Body Problem is a fantastic book series. If you've been listening to this for a while, you obviously know that I am a massive Walking Dead fan. Been a fan since the comics, of the shows, the Telltale games, all of it. And you know, I just can't help myself but talk about how the I think it's like the sixth TV show for The Walking Dead now. I never thought we'd get six shows of this, but yeah, the sixth series for The Walking Dead, The Ones Who Lived, got its first episode drop last weekend, and that episode was actually really good. Episode one of The Ones Who Lived was really enjoyable on my opinion. Andrew Lincoln's character Rick returns to the world of The Walking Dead. After about 5 years of being departed from the show, he is returned for his own like main focused show. It kind of makes Michonne a like a secondary character or like a main character. Um, and it's nice to see him come back. You know, he's a different kind of looking person now. Obviously, he's aged. It's been a little while. You know, I think that kind of works for the show in terms of its like its time length or whatever. But so much has changed. You know, we've had the conclusions for Fear the Walking Dead and The World Beyond, and we've had two new shows that have also technically concluded. Um, Dead City with Negan and Maggie's characters, and Daryl's spin-off show in France, and that was, you know, a while ago. Now that we have this feels like maybe this could be a swan song for The Walking Dead. You know, we have the main character who was gone for a while returning. We have technically a main character from the main show coming back and returning here. So that's a really cool dynamic that we haven't had for a while. Seeing Michonne and Rick, because they're two of the comics' original characters, you know, that have made it to the end of the show. One of the only last surviving main characters based off the comics, which I think is a astounding feat. And yeah, we get a really true glimpse into the end of this series, the real conclusion for at least Rick and Michonne's story. Um, yeah, episode one was good. You know, it focuses mainly on Rick. It shows what he was doing in the years he was gone from season 9 of The Walking Dead up until now, which is probably a year or two after maybe the Walking Dead show probably concludes fully. It's a little hard to tell with that, especially because it's episode one. But you know, we haven't seen him in a while, and he's in a strange predicament right now. He's a prisoner, and he's trying to escape off and on, and that seems like a fine motive for the main character. But then it gets into a really cool twist where the CRM, the Civic Republic, the big military people that stole Rick, that have been teased throughout the franchise, um, they are trying to integrate him into the into the Civic Republic. You know, they're trying to reform him. You know, and we get explanation on things like the A's and B's that was teased so long ago in the show. We get a little more explanation on like the fall of society and Operation Cobalt, and we get that peace build. It's a little bit in episode one, but I think we get a lot more later on in the show. But it is there, which is actually really nice for longtime fans such as myself. And it's good to have that, like those little kernels, because just coming for Rick isn't enough. You kind of need to kind of flesh out the CRM and that A and B stuff and the whole reason of taking him away. Because as you watch the show, you realize that like this it does kind of happen because of circumstance, and it's so odd because it happened so back then, and we're here now. But I'm not really trying to complain about that. They had an idea back then for taking Rick away and bringing him back, and I know that they plan to maybe do like a movie series or a trilogy or whatever the hell for that. But we have a TV show now, and this is what we got. So we have to take it with a little grain of salt every now and again. Um, but yeah, this first episode teases more involvement of the CRM and how they were played into the show's beginnings, stuff like that. And then the show's obviously going to focus on Rick and then Michonne and you know versing the CRM. Like that's all we can per se for now. We can foresee that coming up. But what I'm more intrigued for is where it ends. Obviously we're going to have Rick and Michonne banding together, deciding to go back or leave, and they're going to fight the CRM or something. That's going to happen. It's a TV show. But I want to see if they're going to bring any of the other characters back. Like, you know, a big thing that I disliked in Fear the Walking Dead was how often characters just travel to and from and don't get hurt or injured or, anything. It's just so much of them being okay with that traveling. Um, that's a nitpick for Fear the Walking Dead specifically, but to transfer that into this, we're having people travel such vast distances in horrendous climates, not just weather climates, but like it's a zombie environment and there's, dissidents, there's survivors out there, you know, that's very dangerous. So that idea of going back home or staying here is obviously there, but I think he's gonna try and go home. I think that's obviously gonna be the goal, but they're trying to hit more on like saving the world kind of thing. They kind of did that with Daryl's show, which is I hope they bring back that as well. You know, it'd be nice to see Rick um, reunite with characters other than just Michonne. Obviously, this is a very Valentine's love kind of centered themed series for The Walking Dead. A very different spin than what we've seen, but I like it. I thought it was pretty cool. It's nice seeing Rick again, and I'm intrigued. I really am. Episode one ended on a pretty solid cliffhanger, and you can kind of expect where the show is going to end, but I want to see Rick return home. I want to see, him return to his original family. I'd like for some kind of, you know, bigger nod towards Fear the Walking Dead and World Beyond and Dead City and the Daryl stuff, like a real conclusion, you know. There's a lot of legacy for the show, and it's not the kind of ending that I don't think anybody ever foresaw. I think people foresaw the show doing the comic book run, doing all the comic book arcs and those stories, being a little different, but then just ending. And then, uh, it would just end. But no, we got a bunch of spin-offs. Fear the Walking Dead came out, and then World Beyond, and then around like season 8, season 9, right? They get rid of Carl, which is the biggest change of the whole show. And then right after that, Rick is gone. So the show is completely different in terms of its perspective. But it's not all bad. I still think seasons 9, 10, 11 are pretty good. Um, yeah, and then that only bred forth with Dead City and the Daryl spinoff, which is pretty solid. As a fan for the TV shows. So if you like The Walking Dead and you want to see more on what happened with Rick after leaving the main show, if you want to know anything that happens that ties into Fear the Walking Dead or World Beyond, go watch The Ones Who Live. I think we're gonna get you know answers to questions that didn't necessarily need to be answered. Robert Kirkman's been saying for years over just the comic book series and this series that like the origin of the virus isn't necessarily important, and it wasn't. At the time it was not for these characters. They try to tease it for season one of the show, and they kind of leave it at that. And it's obviously a bigger thing now. Um, but it was never a forefront. It was always about the characters and their struggle to survive. And I think that was always, the most interesting part of the Walking Dead shows. And, the CGI has gotten so much better. The way that they have the zombies looking and performing, some of them are mixed in with CGI, like larger props, but they have makeups and paints and plastics and all this kind of stuff. And you have these um, actors wearing these heavy plastic makeup garbs for like hours, and what I imagine is like horrendous weather conditions. Whether or not it's like getting hit with rain, artificial or natural rain, or you're just in there baking in the sun like an actual corpse. You know, there's some dedication to all that, and I think that's admirable for what could be called Cable's or whatever's longest running TV show. I'm not necessarily sure. The Walking Dead's been going on for a while, but half of it's on like streaming services, so it doesn't really count, I don't think. But yeah, go watch The Walking Dead before it's spoiled for you, because it's you've waited this long. Like, I've waited this long, and as a big fan, I feel like I have a duty to myself to finish it, even if people think that like it's a different kind of show now. It's still um, it's trying to live up to the expectation that it was going to live up to with its movies or anything like that, and it's at least something. They could have just scrapped it and told Andrew Lincoln, "Nah, we're just done. Rick's done. Just forget about it." They could have done that, but they did not, and I think that's really good for us and the fans. So it's just another little sort of watch. I think it's nice. That's about it for like the main things that I've seen and watched, but upcoming is pretty solid. We had a new Planet of the Apes movie, and Godzilla vs King Kong trailers came out. Those looked really great. Um, the Dune 2 movie comes out in just a few weeks. I'm unsure when I'm going to be seeing that, but I'm going to try and do something about that with the podcast. Maybe play some Dune Spice Wars or something. Looking forward to that. We also got a bunch of news on Disney and Marvel's plans for their Marvel content, I guess, like their MCU stuff. And I haven't seen anything for like what was it? What's it? What If season 2? I haven't seen anything for that. I haven't watched that. But I am intrigued by their Deadpool 3 movie, because that's the movie that's probably going to make or break them. It's they've already tried teasing the multiverse stuff, and it never worked. We never truly got that real Fox kind of merger with their content or any of the other smaller Marvel projects. And their latest Phase 4 and Phase 5 stuff never worked out. So Deadpool 3 is probably what's gonna make or break the Disney's MCU. And then we got things for Fantastic Four movie, which I have my issues with. I think that now is a little too late for a Fantastic Four movie, but depending on how they do it, it could be integrated really well. That I think that's more of a speculation kind of thing. I'm sure it'll be fine, but it's Fantastic Four. It's truly hit or miss. It's truly hit or miss. You can either be like good bad or bad bad. I don't expect good from here. But then we also got, a trailer for the X-Men animated show based off of the 96 TV show, which I think is pretty good. Or is it 86? I'm not really sure. I think it's the 80s. I haven't watched the full show, but I do plan on watching it before the new series drops. I think it's going to be really great. So, that's really all I have to plan for coming up this year is those games and movies coming out. There isn't really a whole lot. I'm, games are not really coming out this year from what we've seen. I think we're waiting on all of the announcements for like June and the state of plays and stuff like that. So there's a lot of time to wait, and I think companies are probably waiting on those the next gen hardware stuff, not like the PS6 or Xbox 720, but like the PS5 Slim and the Switch 2, whatever those are going to be. It's seems to be a pretty lull time for games, because it's if you're a company looking at video games, you see like a lot smaller games like Pal World and these other smaller games take big big cuts of profits for the industry while being made on like half the budget that some of these AAA games are made. I don't know. You know, the layoffs are happening for a reason, and it seems scary because you'd want the companies to have enough manpower to make these great and difficult games, but it seems like they have all this manpower and they still don't make great games. It's a weird double-edged sword that's kind of going on right now. But everyone just you know be yourself, and I hope to talk to you guys soon. This has been episode 25 of the Gamer Librarian podcast. Be sure to subscribe for updates on future episode releases. Leave a like and comment on what games or books I should talk about in the future. Thank you, and see you next time.